The most prominent election lawyer in the country right now is Marc Elias. He is the Democratic powerhouse lawyer who headed the team that won more than 60 lawsuits against Republicans in the Trump campaign over the 2020 election. Elias has been fighting new voting restrictions put in place by Republican legislatures ever since. Well, today, Marc Elias wrote an op-ed warning about the method in the Republicans' madness here and warning that it may be leading us toward a real crisis. He said, quote, immediately following the insurrection on January 6th, Republican state legislatures began laying the groundwork for 2022 and 2024. They enacted new voter suppression laws optimized to disenfranchise black, brown, and young voters. They created false narratives of election regularities and rallied their supporters around the big lie. The goal of these new provisions is to manufacture fraud where none exists. Since one of the big problems in all of the sort of bogus Republican Trumpy election audits and election results investigations is that they haven't been able to actually find any significant fraud anywhere, what Elias is saying is that the strategy here is to manufacture it, to make a bunch of new, tricky to understand laws that do make it harder to vote. And then when people make mistakes by voting how they have always voted, call that fraud and use that as a pretext to overturn any election results that you don't like. The way Marc Elias puts it today, he says, quote, we are one, maybe two elections away from a constitutional crisis. Joining us now is Marc Elias, election attorney, founder of the group Democracy Docket. Mr. Elias, it's nice of you to be with us tonight. Thanks for taking the time.
Thanks for having me.
Am I right that you are trying to help us knit together these various things that we have been reporting on sort of in isolation to see them as part of a single strategy, to see them as things that work together to try to subvert future election results?
Yeah, that's exactly right, Rachel. Too many people are looking at the fight for voting rights and against voter suppression as somehow separate and distinct from election subversion. They really go hand in glove. You know, the fact is Republicans didn't find much fraud, really any fraud, because there wasn't much of any fraud. So what they're trying to do now is to make the voting rules harder for people to vote, particularly harder for young voters and minority voters to vote, and essentially manufacturing irregularities where they don't exist, so that they can then use those made-up irregularities in 2022 or 2024 to argue that elections shouldn't be certified and therefore subverted.
If that is the goal, to approach these problems in a way where you are both making it harder to vote, making it harder to vote in such a way that gives you evidentiary pretext for calling the whole operation of the election fraudulent so that you can subvert the result of the election. If these things are all knitted together, where's the place where you can short circuit that? Where's the place that you can stop that?
So look, the first thing we need is for Congress to pass the various voting rights bills that are pending before them, both the Freedom to Vote Act in the Senate, the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, and those will go a long way. Now, there are other things that can be done to specifically target the certification process, which I write about. I think that it's long time past having secretaries of state and governors' signatures required in order to certify election results. We ought to be moving to more nonpartisan ways of certifying election results so that a single Trump acolyte who is a secretary of state can't stop someone from getting a certificate of election simply by refusing to sign a piece of paper.
If the Democrats in Washington aren't able to get it together to do this, if they leave the filibuster rules as they are, if people like Senator Manchin, Senator Sinema continue to not be interested in helping Democratic majority, slim as it is, pass things either by reconciliation or changing the Senate rules, are there things that can be done at the state level, short of just litigating every one of these cases, that could, in some systematic way, provide the kind of protections that you're talking about? Or is this something for which there's only a federal remedy?
So a federal remedy is best. But if Congress doesn't act in this area, then it's incumbent on all of us to take the necessary action. So that means in blue states, by the way, improving the voting laws substantially from where they are in many states where Democrats have the ability to make voting easier. It includes recruiting and training and making sure that good people are filling the slots of local election officials. You know, there's been a lot of reporting recently about how good election officials are being driven out of their positions because Trump crazies are driving them out of their positions. Of course, the courts have to be a piece of this. You know, I started my career as a recount lawyer, and I know the power of the judiciary to ensure that the will of the voters is abided by in election returns. And finally, people like you, the media and activists speaking out and putting a spotlight on what's going on, a spotlight on the fact that Republicans are planning a constitutional crisis by targeting election certification processes. By putting spotlight on it, we might be able to head some of it off.
It does also feel like the people who are in the crosshairs here, the proverbial crosshairs, the elections officials, you know, largely, a lot of them volunteers, a lot of them even in paid positions, you know, technocratic, nonpartisan officials who have been doing this stuff just as experts, quietly in the background without much fuss for all these years before. Those people getting hounded out of their positions, those people being forced out of the way, it's both a tragedy for them and they deserve to be defended. But once they've cleared out of those positions, it opens those positions to be filled by people who are there on a mission to do this at Trump's orders and at increasingly the Republican Party's orders. That's something that feels like it's going to take a very, very long time to get anywhere around when you sort of force out the good actors and make room for the bad actors. That's something that doesn't have an easy fix.
That's right. But you put your finger on something that is really, really important, and that I think too many progressives are looking past, which is that not all election officials are going to be good actors. And so, yes, it is important that we protect the good actors, and it is important that we recruit and put in place as many good actors as possible. But we need to be careful about not lionizing every local election official, because some of those election positions are now going to be filled by Trump acolytes who are going to be there to sabotage the process. And we want to make sure that what we are doing is taking a voter-centric approach. Are voters being able to vote? Are their ballots counting? Is the will of the electorate willing out? That's really what matters.
Marc Elias, can we tell him I'll call him right back?
Sorry about that.
That's okay. It happens to the best of us. I will give you a hall pass for whoever is needing you right now. Marc Elias, election attorney, the founder of Democracy Docket. Marc, it's great to have you here. Thank you so much.
Anytime. Thank you very much.